Welcome to Healthcare Igniters. Healthcare Igniters is a series of brief conversation with the thought leaders. They have ideas and thoughts for 10x impact. Today, our thought leader is Jennifer Wolfe. She is an author, lawyer, advisor to the boards, investor, and entrepreneur. She's actually, she runs a agency, Brand 360, and previously she was a managing partner of a very prominent intellectual property law firm. So welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let's get to a conversation. What's on top of your mind today?
Top of my mind today are some of the driving forces that I see really impacting all organizations and certainly healthcare as well. And that is some of the emerging technologies, that I particularly work on, like blockchain, artificial intelligence, and then looking at the intersection with cybersecurity and how these emerging technologies create new vulnerabilities and how we as humans are using these two technologies that continue to create new vulnerabilities. So there's really this intersection between those three big driving forces.
It's incredible when you think about all these things going on in the technology sector. Now let's bring it to the healthcare world. There's a lot of digital technologies happening, and there are a lot of need to improve quality of care and also reduce cost of care, if you will, in U.S. healthcare. And give us a perspective in terms of how executives in hospital systems, health systems, as well as board, really catching up with the technology and really working through that.
Sure, I think every organization, other than a few that have been in high tech, have struggled with this shifting or transformation is the buzzword, of course, becoming this. We're not a technology company, we're a fill in the blank. We're healthcare, we're retail, we're professional services. Every company, every organization, every healthcare provider is now also a technology company because we use technology for so much. Every human walking through the door is probably carrying around 2 or 3 computers on their person as they walk in. So we are this fully connected society, and I think a lot of companies and organizations are struggling with, how do I adapt my thinking? How do I adapt to our patients who are using technology and expect different things from us? They expect us to be able to provide patient care like they order their Uber or like they, reserve a table. They just expect that. At the same time, you have a workforce that is now connected to all of these devices, and that's creating all these new security concerns. So as leaders in healthcare, whether it's in the C-suite or from the board oversight perspective, there's a need to deeply understand these new expectations and the new threats that come with that.
Tell us more about the risk part of it that the board should really be looking out for.
Absolutely. I mean, the risk part of it now is that if every single one of us is walking around with something that could carry a vulnerability in it, that could, somebody who could stick something into a machine or into a flash drive somewhere and spread a virus, somebody who could send an email. There's questions right now, even with, Facebook or Apple or all of these things, that every single device carries with it the opportunity to bring in other people, and that comes with it those risks. And so today in healthcare, there's a need to be fully apprised of that and understand that human connection to all of these risks that we face, because it's not just that maybe one person is a bad actor, it's that we're all potentially carrying around these things that could create harm from a cyber perspective.
So how do they really learn more about it? There's so much happening. How do people catch up to it and really do something about it from both opportunities and risk, especially when you meet maybe a few times a year in the board context?
Yes, in the board context, it's particularly challenging, and particularly for boards where technology and cybersecurity was not always the top issue. That has shifted in the last 5 or 6 years, where now it really is a top issue. So there's 2 components. One is you have to generally inform yourself. Look for conferences, places you can go, obviously things that you can read, alerts that you can get to information. But then it's also, take that responsibility of doing your homework, get the information you need. What is our risk exposure? I have long been saying that I think cybersecurity will soon be the Sarbanes-Oxley, was to finance. where Sarbanes-Oxley came along and suddenly we have to have independent auditors, we have to have an independent valuation of where we are. I think cyber is going to be the same way, and it's not that you don't have good people working for you or you don't trust the people working for you, it's the whole concept of trust but verify. If you're in a boardroom, the liability that you face if there is a cyber event and you have not properly provided oversight to the executive team is pretty serious. So you have to be thinking about your own, should we have our own independent audit or review of our cyber status so that we can make informed and smart decisions about the risks we face and what investments we should be making.
Tell us more about in that area. A lot of healthcare is not for profit, and many people get into it in the board on a voluntary basis. Does the liability change for them?
Not really, not from a cyber standpoint. And obviously, we've joked about this before where, if your credit card's stolen, you can make more money or you can get that fixed. If your life is gone, if something is seriously harmed, you can't get that back. So the risk in a healthcare environment is so drastically different than just dealing with money or with paintings hanging on the wall of an art museum or something like that, that regardless of whether it's a not-for-profit board, the liability is still there. And the risks are so great now because we're so reliant upon technology, because the vulnerabilities are becoming so much more frequent. We have to take that extra step to say, how do we evaluate this? Because there will be liability in the boardroom. If you have not properly overseen the executive management team, if the executive management team knew that there were risks and failed to take action, everyone is going to share in that liability.
That's incredible. Do you think regulations are catching up?
I think they are. There are a number of laws right now dealing with privacy issues, certainly as a generalized basis, but also cybersecurity, looking at boards, particularly publicly traded boards, and trying to determine should there be a dedicated person on that board to cyber or technology related issues. I think it is a best practice for all boards right now to say we should have a committee, whether it's a subset of the audit committee or it's its own standalone committee, where you have a few directors who are very focused on overseeing that function. It's simply too big, it's too complicated. It's equally important to the financial oversight at this point in time. And so I think we're seeing more boards look at that as a best practice versus just waiting for that regulation to come.
This is incredible. It's extremely educational. Most of us really don't have an insight in terms of what goes on. You deal with it on a regular basis, so advice is, and your insights are invaluable. So, maybe to summarize it, if you could just say, what are 2 or 3 things that you would actually tell health systems as tips? I think that would be great.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Number one is to get information. Don't stick your head in the sand. It's too easy to do right now. Everybody's done that for the last 5 or 6 years. You just can't do that anymore. You have to get good, objective advice and information about what your risk exposure is. Be sure that your board is properly informed. If it's your job inside a healthcare institution, your board needs to have that information so they can then provide that guidance in terms of what additional investments should be made. And I think it's just being aware and looking at these driving forces. It's impacting every organization. No one is going to escape this, and it's just going to get faster and faster as new technologies come. People start adopting them faster and faster, then new vulnerabilities get created, and that cycle will just keep continuing. So there's an understanding now, among most of us who work in this space, you've never reached, the finish line and you say, check the box, we're done, we don't have to do anything. You get to the bottom of your checklist, go back up to the top because there's probably some new items on that list and you have to go back through it. And that's just now the new normal of operations. And I think those are the things, whether you're an executive or a board member in a healthcare organization, that you need to think about when it comes to managing this risk.
Very interesting. Be aware, act fast, and continue to monitor because it never ends. There's a cycle. In the past, we call it continuous improvement. Here is the continuous monitoring of your risk and managing your risk. Thank you, Jen.
Thanks so much. Thank you.